14. I'm 80. My Amish husband's first question after our wedding was about another woman. Did Martha cry when it happened to her? That is the first thing my husband asks after we are married, while the lamp flame ticks inside its glass and rain taps the tin roof above our bed. His voice is low, too low. I am still wearing the white cotton nightdress my mother hemmed by hand, its collar stiff against my throat, and my bare feet are cold on the painted floorboards. I don't answer, because I know Martha. Everyone knows Martha. She sits 3 benches ahead of me at meeting, always with one glove buttoned wrong, and 2 weeks before my wedding she pressed a jar of peach preserves into my hands without looking at my face. Now my husband is pulling at the seam of his left sleeve, over and over, asking what she told me, what I know, whether women are meant to be afraid. Then he says her name again, not mine. I remember the rain stopping right then. No, wait. It didn't stop. The gutter outside overflowed, and one hard drop kept striking the wash basin under the window. Plink, plink, plink. I want to ask why he is thinking about another woman in our room. I want to ask what happened to her. I want to ask why nobody told either of us what marriage would ask of our bodies. But my mouth won't open. I am 18 that night. I am 80 now, and I finally know why he asked. Quick pause. My name is Sarah, and this is Rebecca Amish Homie. If these stories make you feel less alone, subscribe. It's free, and it lets me keep telling them. Tell me in the comments, what does silence teach a marriage to hide? And if you want to go further, a super chat or membership that tells me these voices are worth hearing. Now, back to what happened. What happened began long before that room, though I didn't know it then. In our district, a girl's body was treated like the locked cupboard above the stove, useful, important, and not hers to open without permission. Nobody sat me down and said that. I learned it when Aunt Ruth lowered her voice if a woman was expecting, when Mama folded the monthly cloths beneath the flour sacks, when the bishop spoke about purity, and every girl stared at the floorboards worn pale by boots. The ordnung was mostly carried in habit, not paper, and habit can feel like God when you're young. That's the thing nobody tells you. By 14, I could harness a horse in sleet, knead 6 loaves before breakfast, and tell which hen had stopped laying by the shape of her comb. But I couldn't name the parts of my own body. I thought that was modesty. I thought not knowing was proof that I was good. The rule lived in tiny places. It lived in the way women went silent when a man entered the wash house, in the quick fold of a newspaper when an English advertisement showed bare shoulders, in the glance Mama gave me when I once asked why married women sometimes cried after quilting day. I was 13, no, 12, because my blue dress still had the let-down seam at the waist, and I nearly asked again. Then I saw Cousin Leah standing by the pump, with her face blotched red, while 2 older women told her to be grateful for her husband's patience. No one raised a voice. That was how we were taught. A look could shut a door harder than a lock. After that, I tucked questions away like bent pins in a jar, sharp things hidden under useful things. And when my wedding was set for the first Thursday after harvest, everyone began preparing me for marriage, without once preparing me for what marriage meant. My older sister, Anna, pulled me behind the smokehouse 3 weeks before the wedding. The hickory smoke made my eyes water, and she kept rubbing one thumb across a crack in her wedding ring. She gave me 11 words. Be quiet, be kind, and let him lead the first night. 11. I counted them later while shelling peas into a chipped white bowl. Martha told me even less. She handed me those peach preserves, tied with brown string, and said, "You'll learn." My mother packed 2 nightdresses, a comb, salve for cracked hands, and a small Bible with my name written in purple ink because the black pen had gone dry. No one told Jacob anything useful either. His father had said a husband should be gentle and firm, 4 words that can mean almost anything when two frightened people are left alone. We were both walking toward a door everyone else had crossed, and neither of us had been told what was on the other side. I did love Jacob. I need to say that before I tell you the rest. He had a crooked front tooth and a laugh that came out in one surprised burst, like a cough he was embarrassed to own. We met properly at a Sunday singing, though I had noticed him months before when he fixed the loose wheel on Widow Miller's cart without being asked. He brought me a pear once, still warm from his coat pocket, and cut away the bruised part with his pocket knife before giving it to me. That kindness mattered. On courting nights, we sat in the front room while Mama mended socks 6 feet away, and Jacob spoke to me about a farm with 2 milk cows and apple trees along the south fence. I think our wedding was on a Thursday. Yes, Thursday, because the bread for Friday's meal was already rising beneath the red-striped towel. He trusted the rules as much as I did. That's the thing nobody tells you. Sometimes harm arrives wearing the face of someone who is just as lost. The days before the wedding were full of work, which was a mercy. We scrubbed benches with lye soap until my knuckles split, polished every spoon, and borrowed 12 white plates from 3 different families because ours didn't match. Women came through the kitchen with flour on their sleeves and advice that stopped just before it became useful. Don't fret, men are simple. A wife adjusts. Anna tucked lavender into my trunk, then took it back out because Jacob said the smell made him sneeze. I remember laughing at that. I was still able to laugh. The morning of the wedding, Mama pinned my cape with the dull silver pin grandmother had worn, and her fingers shook once near my collarbone. I waited for her to say something. Anything. Instead, she smoothed the fabric over my shoulders and told me rain was coming from the west. By sunset, the guests were gone. The last buggy wheels had faded down the lane, and Jacob closed the bedroom door with both hands. The room was smaller than I had imagined, with a walnut bed pressed against the far wall and one chair holding Jacob's folded coat. Lamplight made the plaster look yellow, where smoke had darkened the ceiling. Outside, a horse shifted in the lean-to, its halter ring tapping wood every few breaths, and the rain had turned the window glass cold enough to fog beneath my fingers. I wore the white nightdress with tiny blue stitches at the cuffs, one cuff tighter, because Mama had miscounted the gathers. Jacob stood by the washstand in his undershirt, rubbing the heel of his right hand against his chest as if something hurt there. He looked young, younger than he had that morning with his black hat and straight back. There was a damp patch near the basin shaped like Ohio, and I stared at it because it was easier than looking at him. Then he asked about Martha, not with hunger, with fear. That was worse somehow, because fear meant he knew there was something to fear. "What did she tell you?" he asked. His voice caught on the last word. I said nothing, though that wasn't quite true. She had told me I'd learn. Jacob nodded too fast and sat on the edge of the bed, making the rope springs groan beneath him. His hands rested flat on his knees. Mine twisted the nightdress until the blue stitches dug into my palms. My brother said women. He stopped. The rain struck the tin roof in a hard sweep, then softened. "Said what?" I asked. He looked at the floor, that they don't like it at first. My toes curled against the cold boards. I wanted to tell him to leave the room, and I wanted him to hold me because I had never felt so alone. Both were true. He reached for my hand. I let him take it. His palm was rough from the sawmill, and his thumb trembled against the small bone in my wrist. He tried to do what he believed a husband was meant to do, and I tried to do what I had been told a wife must allow. That is the plainest way I can say it. When my body tightened and I pulled back, he stopped for one breath, maybe 2. "Am I hurting you?" he whispered. I said no. The word came out before I chose it. That's what training can do. It puts an answer in your mouth before your own truth reaches it. He moved again. I stared at the nail above his shoulder where a picture had once hung, a clean square in the smoke-stained wall around it. His hand shifted. I stopped breathing. Then he stopped too, frightened by the sound I made. "Sarah?" he said. "I'm all right," I told him, though my jaw shook so hard my teeth clicked. He wasn't cruel. "I need you to hear me." He was a 24-year-old man. 23. No, 24. Following instructions no one had given him clearly. Afterward, he sat with his back against the headboard and asked whether he had sinned, not whether I was hurt. He didn't have the words for that question yet. Neither did I. I crossed the room slowly, washed my face with water that smelled faintly of iron, and watched one drop run from my chin onto the front of my nightdress. Jacob said my name twice. I couldn't turn around. On the quilt, a green thread had worked loose from a star-shaped patch, and I pulled it until the seam puckered beneath my fingers. I kept pulling. It was such a small thing, ruining that neat little star, but I remember thinking at least this damage had a thread I could see. We slept facing opposite walls, while the lamp burned low and made the glass chimney tick. Near dawn, Jacob touched my shoulder and asked again if Martha had cried. That was when I understood his question wasn't about another woman at all. It was about what his brother had told him happened in Martha's marriage. Neither of us understood that fear can make a body close against touch, or that a wife could say stop after saying yes, or that pain was not a test of obedience. We had been taught duty as if duty could replace knowledge. Jacob's brother had heard from Martha's husband that she cried for 3 nights after her wedding, and the men had passed that story around as a warning about female weakness, not as a sign that something had gone wrong. Martha was 17. She still wore her girlhood apron on washing days because the married one had not been finished. No elder asked her what happened. No woman gave her language for it. Jacob wasn't trying to frighten me when he said her name. He was checking whether suffering was normal. That fact sat between us for years, quiet as dust on a Bible shelf. We thought marriage required women to endure what men were too uninformed to recognize. What we lacked wasn't kindness alone, it was knowledge with permission inside it. I didn't know the word consent. I didn't know that comfort mattered, that trust could be paused, that bodies have signals worth hearing. Those words came much later, outside the district, printed on a cream-colored page in a nurse's office, where the clock clicked so loudly I could count the seconds between breaths. He wasn't trying to hurt me. That's what makes it worse. A whole system had trained him not to ask the right questions, and trained me not to answer them truthfully. The silence wasn't a gap. It was built into courtship, sermons, mothers' lowered eyes, fathers' half-sentences, and the jokes men told beside the harness room. One clear sentence could have changed that night. Either person can stop, at any time, for any reason. I learned it almost 50 years too late, and by then, the grief had already learned my name. Grief didn't arrive at once. It settled into routines, like flour dust along a shelf after wiping. I turned my face toward the wall when Jacob reached for me, and I counted knots in the pine boards until my breath stopped shaking. By our first winter, I could leave my body without moving an inch. I'd think about the brown mare's left hoof, the crack in the milk pail, the number of jars in the cellar. 47. Anything I could count. Jacob thought I was quiet because I was modest, and I let him think that because neither of us had another story. That's the thing nobody tells you. You can build a whole marriage inside a misunderstanding and still call it faithful. I became good at disappearing. Very good. If silence had handed out ribbons, I'd have won blue. In daylight, we looked settled. Jacob sharpened my kitchen knives every Saturday and left the smoothest apple on the windowsill. I packed his lunch in waxed paper and tucked in cinnamon bread when there was some. At night, I kept a folded handkerchief beneath my pillow and pressed it into my fist when I felt myself going far away, I loved him. I resented him. Sometimes I watched the pale place beside his temple pulse, and tenderness rose in me, and it hurt. Other mornings, his boots on the stairs made the skin between my shoulders tighten. I don't know what to call that kind of love. It was real, but it was built around a locked room. We didn't speak about Martha again for almost 2 years, though her name stayed in our house like smoke caught in curtains. At a quilting bee the next spring, Anna sat across from me, piecing a green diamond into a black square. Her needle stopped halfway through the cloth when Ruth whispered, "Does it still hurt?" Anna looked toward the doorway. "Not if I stay still." 4 words. Ruth bent over her stitches and said, "Mine got easier." No one asked what easier meant. I nearly told them about the handkerchief, the counting, the way my tongue pressed against my teeth. My mouth opened. Then Sister Miriam carried in pickled beets. Vinegar filled the room, and the moment closed. But I saw Anna's left hand shaking beneath the quilt frame. She saw me see it. That look was the first true lesson I received about women in our district. We weren't alone. We were trained to mistake shared pain for private failure. Martha's story reached me in pieces. She was married 4 months when she began sleeping in the pantry, saying the bedroom was too close. One morning, her husband found her beside the flour barrel with a wool shawl around her shoulders, though it was July, her hair pinned from the day before. She told her mother, "I feel gone." Her mother washed a cup and said, "A wife gets used to marriage." When she asked the deacon's wife for advice, she got a bottle of tonic and was told to pray before bed. Questions were treated like sparks near dry hay. Someone stamped them out, then praised the clean floor. Martha stopped asking. 4 months later, she was expecting her first child, and everyone called it good. At the Sunday meal, she stared at the skin cooling on her gravy and didn't take a bite. By our 3rd year, Jacob knew something was wrong, but thought the fault lived inside him. One night, he sat at the kitchen table and turned his spoon in cold coffee until it made a soft scrape. "Do you hate me?" he asked. I said no. Then I said, "I don't know." That was my first honest answer I gave him, and it frightened us both. He slept in the barn for 2 nights, not as punishment, but because he had nowhere else to put his shame. The 3rd morning, I found him mending a halter with red eyes and straw in his beard. We stood 6 feet apart while cows shifted behind him. I wanted to cross that space. I couldn't. And then "Sorry. Give me a second," he said. I thought being good would make me know what to do. So had I. Decades passed before anyone gave me a word that fit. I was 67, sitting in a county clinic with blue plastic chairs bolted to the floor, waiting for a blood pressure check after leaving the district. A nurse placed a folded pamphlet beside me. The front showed a drawing of 2 circles, one inside the other, with the words consent and boundaries beneath them. I almost put it back because the woman in the drawing wore earrings, and part of me still judged earrings before ideas. Then I read one sentence. Silence is not agreement. My hands went cold. The paper shook with a dry rattling sound. I read it again. The room smelled of sanitizer and burnt coffee, and behind the wall a child cried over a shot. But I was 18 again, staring at that clean square above Jacob's shoulder. I wasn't angry at first. I was sad. So sad I sat in our parked car with both hands on the wheel until the clinic lights came on. I grieved for the girl in the white nightdress who thought pain proved she was dutiful. I grieved for the young man pulling at his sleeve because he had been handed power without wisdom and duty without tenderness. We were both prisoners of that silence, though the bars were not placed the same way. That's the thing nobody tells you. Naming what happened doesn't always bring relief. Sometimes it brings a second wound, knowing it could have been different. Jacob and I might have learned each other slowly. We might have laughed. We might have stopped together. We might have begun again without fear beside the bed. Not for us then. I tried to explain this to an English woman from the clinic named Diane. She wore purple glasses and kept peppermint candies in a glass bowl shaped like a leaf. When I said no one taught us, she answered, "But surely you knew you could say no." Surely, that word closed my throat. I wanted to hand her my childhood, let her feel its weight. Mama's glance, Anna's 11 words, Martha's untouched plate, the bishop's voice. Instead, I unwrapped one peppermint and held it on my tongue until the edges softened. People outside sometimes fully thought leaving meant the spell broke at the fence line. It didn't. I carried the rules in my shoulders, my sleep, how I apologized before asking a question. I was homesick for people who couldn't hear me, and lonely among people who couldn't understand why. And still, the district gave me things I treasure. I miss horses before dawn, hooves dull against frozen earth while steam rose from their backs like a kettle. I miss bread from the wood oven, the bottom crust dark and smoky, and Mama tapping each loaf with one bent finger. I miss my grandmother's hands when she prayed, thick-knuckled and freckled, resting open on her black apron, as if setting down every burden for 1 minute. Those gifts are real. So is the harm. Beauty and harm can live in the same house, eat at the same table, and bow over the same meal. The harm was silence dressed as goodness. I don't say that with hate. Some days I still picture Sister Miriam carrying those pickled beets, careful not to spill, and I feel tenderness for all of us. Now I still choose what stays. I keep the bread, the steady work, the way neighbors arrived before sunrise when a barn burned. I leave behind the teaching that a woman's body becomes holy only when it becomes useful to someone else. I keep Jacob's pear, warm from his pocket, and leave his question in that cold room. He died knowing more than he'd been given that day. Near the end, he held my hand beneath a hospital blanket with tiny blue diamonds and said, "I wish I had known how to listen." I told him I wished we both had. That wasn't forgiveness tied in a neat bow. It wasn't blame either. It was two old people standing at last in the truth, with no rule between us telling us where to look. That was enough for that day. If you grew up somewhere your own body was kept from you like something dangerous, I see you. If you were taught that love meant staying quiet while your body begged for words, I see you. You survived something, and surviving is enough. You are never truly broken. You're not dirty for what you didn't know, and you're not cruel for naming it now. The child you were never failed a secret test. She used the tools she was given, even when every tool was made for silence. Maybe you still count ceiling tiles. Maybe you freeze when someone asks what you want. Maybe you laugh at the wrong moment because tears feel too close. Your body learned those things to keep you here. That's the thing nobody tells you. The habits that shame you may once have saved you. To the one still inside, you're allowed to notice what hurts. To the one who left, distance doesn't erase what your body remembers. To the one thinking about leaving, you don't have to solve your whole life tonight. To the one who stayed married and is only now finding words, it isn't too late to tell the truth. To the one who recognized herself 3 minutes ago, breathe before you judge your younger self. And to the person who loves someone shaped by silence, listen without rushing to explain. There may be years behind one small sentence. There may be a whole locked cupboard inside the word fine. You deserve patience, care, and room to speak at your own pace, without anyone choosing the ending for you. Wherever you are in this, I see you, and you are not alone. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you felt listening to this, or the moment making something in your life click into place. There's much more I haven't said yet. I'm just getting started, and there are stories I haven't been brave enough to tell, but I'm getting closer. Subscribe to Rebecca Amish Home E for stories that name what silence tried to bury, without turning people into villains or pretending healing is simple. And to the members and Super Chat family, you're the reason the next story gets told. If you want to be part of that, the door is always open. I'm Sarah. I'm 80 years old. I've carried this story for 62 years, through 6 homes, 3 births, 1 funeral, and more quiet mornings than I can count. And I no longer mistake silence for peace. Your body was always worthy of a voice.